Hey, what's up guys? Today I will present you how to remove the intake manifold on a Mercedes A-Class from W169 generation. Some of the most common reasons for doing that will be replacing the intake gaskets between the intake and the engine block, fixing a vacuum leak, replacing the intake itself in case you found a crack in it, or you might want to remove the intake simply because you want to get access to one of the other components like the starter, the spark plugs, the NOx sensor, or maybe replace the valve cover gasket. So I'm going to start by removing these two bolts. In order to take out the computer, use a T20. Also, I forgot to mention, before doing this job, I raised the car and placed it on jack stands. So now I have the working space on my level. Next, you will have to remove the wiring harnesses from the PCM. Let's do that now. You've got this little handle which you have to pull and also pull the connector out in the same time, like that. Twist this connector and take it out from the air filter box. Just twist it and pull it like so. With the E10, remove these two bolts. Now, in order to remove this intake hose, you'll have to pry out the end of it from these 4 pins. You can see the holes where the pins are catching the hose. Now you can push the air filter box in this direction and take it out from the throttle body, lift it up, and it will come from the lower support. Now you can take apart these wiring harnesses. Yours might be connected with a zip tie on the intake. Just cut those zip ties and then the wiring harness will come out and you can place them out of the way. Next, with the T30, let's remove the throttle body's bolts. There are 4 of them in each corner. When removing the last bolt, make sure that you hold the throttle because it's gonna fall. Here we go. Down here is the PCV breathing hose, which is connected to the throttle body, as you can see, in order to recirculate the blow-by gases from the cylinders. Now you can unplug the throttle body, so use something tiny and sharp to release the tabs. From this point you can mark each connector you remove, because at the end of this job, when you remove the intake, you'll have a lot of connectors around and it might be confusing. Now you can pull out this brake booster hose. Also disconnect this little vacuum hose, and now you can place this aside when working down here. It's much convenient. On the front of the intake you will have this black metal bracket, which is held on by these 2 bolts, E10. Use your left hand, and from this position it's much easier to remove them. These are the bolts. Next, with the T30, I will remove these 2 bolts. This is the metal bracket. If you notice, on these 3 holes it will be connected the throttle body. Down here you've got only the holes but not the threads. Next, I will remove the intake air temperature sensor. I'm just gonna twist it like that and then wiggle it out. Unplug the connector. Now if you look down here, here is the evaporative purge solenoid. So you can see it down there. There is 1 bolt there and 1 there. You can actually see from this angle how I can use the mirror and loosen the bolts. Here are the bolts. Here is the solenoid. So unplug the connector and also remove it from this vacuum hose, which is going to the evaporative canister. From this side of the intake, you'll have to unplug some of the sensors. The camshaft position sensor, manifold absolute pressure sensor, and down here you've got the intake location bridge element solenoid. You have to slide it off from this bracket. Unplug these vacuum lines. Unplug the electric connector and the solenoid comes out. Down here you've got this wire harness connected to the engine block. Remove this clip as well from the intake, just pull it out. And now the wiring harness is free from this side. Next, down here you've got the oxygen sensor connector. Just wiggle it out from this bracket. Now in order to unplug the oxygen sensor, you can see down here There's this plastic flap, you have to press it and then like that. Also remember the position of this wire. It goes through the intake and connects with the main wiring harness. Next, I will unplug the coil packs. The coil pack is held on by just one bolt. Here is the coil pack. I will place it down here. Now I can finally remove the connector as well from the second coil pack. Now you'll have this ground wire down there with the E10. You can remove the bolt. Next, in order to completely remove the wiring harness out of the way, we will have to remove the fuel rail. The fuel rail is held on by two bolts. One is down there. You can see is a T40. So between the cylinder 4 and 3. And then we've got between the cylinder 1 and 2, one more bolt down there. Again T40. To work in such tight spaces, this is going to be my setup. I've got here the torque bit T40. I'm going to place it on this type of adapter. Then one more, kind of the same type, which is kind of locking on position. Then I will come with a 1/4 of an inch socket and a new joint. You can see this bunch of adapters are quite flexible, which is very good. And I'm going to place this part of the adapters by hand on the bolt. I'll make sure that it sits on the bolt. Now I'll connect the 1/4 of an inch socket on top of the bits. Now I'm gonna hold with my left hand to keep the assembly straight. Here it comes, the longest bolt which holds the intake and the fuel rail. For the second bolt, the same procedure. Place my bit in there. Now, under the intake, the fuel rail should come out. You can just pull it. Now you could see why I had to disconnect all these sensors on this side. There we go. Now the only thing that holds the intake on are the rest of the bolts. The priority is not to round them up because it's going to be extremely difficult to remove them once they are rounded up. So be very careful when you twist the ratchet. Make sure that this torx bit sits properly on the bolt. For example, one of the most difficult bolts to remove is this one under the coolant hose. You can see how you can guide yourself with the mirror. That is the bolt which I'm removing now. When removing the last bolts, make sure that you don't lean too much weight on the intake. The last bolt is out and the intake is also out. So here is the intake. You can see it's full with oil and debris in there. Now let's have a look down here. You've got access to the water pump, the NOx sensor, the thermostat housing, the starter, even the spark plugs are located down here. And now it's much easier to work on them. So after I cleaned up the intake holes and I replaced the gaskets, now it's time to install back the intake manifold. I'm gonna go through the most important points and things which are worth to be mentioned, because from this point the installation is the reverse process of removal. I'm gonna install first the long bolt in the middle, which will catch as well the oil dipstick. Also remember to place thread locker on the bolts. So I'm gonna take some silicone spray and lubricate the injectors. And you can simply press the fuel rail. When installing back this metal bracket, make sure that you tighten first these two bolts at the bottom. So I double check that all the connectors are on, everything is in position as it was before. Finally, I can place back the air filter box. Alright guys, that was it. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video.